The jungle was thick and full of sounds. Strange birds cried in the distance, and giant leaves dripped with rain. It was a hot planet, wild and dangerous. Captain Rylan stood in front of the training camp, arms crossed, eyes sharp. He had trained many soldiers before, but today was different. Today, he was told to train. An alien girl. She stepped out of the small shuttle quietly, only 4 feet tall, with glowing blue skin and long black hair. Her big eyes stared at him without fear. 2 soft ears twitched above her head. Like a cat's, she wore a simple training uniform, but even that looked too big for her small body. She looked more like a child than a fighter. Rylan frowned. "This is a joke," he said to the officer next to him, but the officer only replied, "Orders from above, Captain. She's yours. To train." Then he walked away, leaving Rylan and the alien girl alone. "What's your name?" Rylan asked. She looked at him, then looked down. "I don't have one," she whispered. Rylan sighed. "Fine. I'll call you Kid until you earn a real name." From that day, training began. Rylan was hard on her. He gave her the toughest drills, the heaviest packs, the longest runs. She had to wake up before everyone else, and sleep after everyone was already in bed. He thought she would break, cry, or quit, but she didn't. She trained in silence, always watching, always learning. Even when her small legs shook from exhaustion, she kept going. Even when her hands bled from climbing ropes, she never asked for help. The other soldiers laughed behind her back. "She's too small," they said. "She's a pet, not a soldier." Rylan heard it all, and sometimes he agreed, but deep inside, something told him not to give up on her just yet. One night, long after lights out, Rylan went to check the field. He stopped when he saw her, alone in the moonlight. She was practicing her moves again, slow and steady. Her arms moved like flowing water, her feet light on the grass. She was copying the combat form he taught the others earlier that day, but she was doing it better, smoother, more focused. He stepped closer, but didn't say anything. She didn't stop, not until she finished the full routine. Then she bowed to the stars and turned to find him watching her. "I just want to be strong," she said quietly. "I don't want to be thrown away again." Rylan felt something strange in his chest. This wasn't just a mission for her. This was her only chance at life. And suddenly, he wasn't angry anymore. He felt respect. The next morning, he gave her a small patch, one earned by every trainee who passed Phase 1. The other soldiers stared. Some even protested. She didn't pass all the tests. One man shouted, "She's still just a kid." But Rylan raised his hand and said, "She earned this more than some of you ever did. Now train with her, or step aside." From that day, something changed. She still didn't talk much, but the others started watching her. She moved faster, thought smarter, and learned quicker than anyone. Rylan began training her one-on-one in secret, testing her skills, pushing her limits. She never disappointed him. Weeks passed, and her body grew stronger. Her eyes grew sharper. Rylan started calling her by a new name, Liri. It meant little flame in an old Earth language. She smiled when she heard it, the first time he saw her smile. But danger was coming. Soon, they would be sent into the deep jungle on a real mission. A mission that could kill even experienced soldiers. And Rylan wasn't sure if she was ready, or if he was ready to risk losing someone he had started to care about. That night, as he looked at her sleeping in her small tent, curled up like a kitten under a thin blanket, he whispered to himself, "She's more than a recruit now." But he didn't know how deep that truth would go. The unwanted recruit had earned her place, but the war was only just beginning. Dark clouds hung low over the jungle. The air was heavy, thick with moisture. Birds stopped singing, and the wind held its breath. Something was wrong. Captain Rylan felt it in his bones. The mission was supposed to be simple. Scout an old alien ruin hidden deep inside the jungle. Take notes, then return to base. But simple things often turn dangerous. And this time, they did. Rylan led the small unit through the twisted green path. Beside him, Liri walked quietly, eyes alert. Her ears twitched at every sound. She said nothing, but her body was tense. She felt it too. Something's watching us, she whispered. Before Rylan could respond, a loud blast shook the trees. A trap exploded behind them, blocking the path. Enemies poured out of the bushes, unknown aliens with rusted armor and sharp weapons. They weren't soldiers, they were hunters. The team scattered, returning fire. Lasers lit the jungle in flashes of red. Screams echoed through the trees. Rylan tried to regroup the team, but communication was jammed. He turned to find Liri only to see her vanish into the shadows. His heart raced. Was she running? Hiding? He didn't know. And then he was hit. A sharp jolt of pain ran through his leg. He fell, crawling behind a log for cover. Bleeding and alone, minutes passed, or maybe hours. The fight had moved deeper into the jungle. Rylan could only hear distant screams and the hiss of blasters. He tried to move, but his leg wouldn't obey. Everything blurred. The world was spinning. Then soft footsteps. Too light to be human, he raised his weapon, weakly, but lowered it just as quickly. Liri knelt beside him, her eyes wide, her small body covered in scratches and dirt. "I found you," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry I left high, was tracking them." She pulled out a small vial and poured a glowing liquid on his wound. Pain burned, then faded. The bleeding slowed. Rylan looked at her with surprise. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "From the plants," she replied. "My people used to live here. I remember some things." She helped him stand, using her tiny frame like a crutch. Together, they moved deeper into the jungle, avoiding the main paths, hiding behind roots and leaves. She led him like she had walked those trails 1,000 times. They reached a small cave behind a waterfall. Liri cleaned his wound again, then sat quietly across from him. Rylan studied her face, lit softly by the glow of jungle insects. She looked tired, but her eyes were still burning with fire. "You saved me," he said quietly. "You taught me," she answered. "You didn't give up on me, so I won't give up on you." He wanted to smile, but his heart was heavy. "We lost the others," he said. "I don't know how many made it." She nodded. "But we're still alive, and that means we can finish the mission." He stared at her in silence. She wasn't just surviving, she was leading. She had learned more than drills and combat. She had learned heart, discipline, loyalty, and he realized he was no longer just her teacher. She was becoming his equal. That night, they rested in the cave. Rylan watched her sleep, curled up like a small shadow. He felt something strange, against something soft, something dangerous, not fear, not duty, but something closer to care. The next morning, Liri guided him to the ruins. Old stone pillars stood tall, covered in vines and alien symbols. She touched one wall and whispered words in a language he didn't know. A secret door opened, revealing a glowing core deep inside. "This is what they were protecting," she said. "This is why they attacked." They took scans, gathered data, and started their journey back. This time, it was Liri leading the way. Rylan followed, trusting her, relying on her, and when they reached the base camp, only 2 soldiers had returned before them. The others were missing or dead. The commander asked Rylan what happened. He told them everything except one thing. He didn't tell them it was the alien girl who saved him, who protected the mission, who walked through death for him, because deep in his heart, he didn't want her to become just a name in a report. She was more than a soldier, more than a recruit. She was becoming something else. As Liri stood beside him, silent as ever, he looked down at her and thought, "She fought for my life. Someday, she might fight for my heart." The base was quiet that night. Only the sound of humming machines and distant thunder filled the air. Most soldiers were asleep, some still treating wounds from the last mission. But Captain Rylan couldn't sleep. He sat alone outside the barracks, watching the rain fall softly over the jungle fence. His mind kept returning to the same image. Liri, standing over him, small and fierce, blood on her hands, fire in her eyes. She had saved his life, again, but there were questions now, too. Many questions. How did she know those jungle paths? How could someone so small fight like a trained assassin? And what was that ruin she opened so easily like it knew her? He stood up, turned, and walked toward the quiet tent where Liri slept. The guards at the door looked confused, but they didn't stop him. He stepped inside. Liri sat cross-legged on her mat, fully awake. She was staring at the wall, her small hands resting on her knees. She didn't flinch when he entered. She had felt him coming. "You don't sleep much," Rylan said, gently. She shook her head. "Too many dreams." He hesitated, then sat across from her. "Liri, who are you really?" She didn't answer at first, just looked down, her fingers tightening around the edge of her blanket. Then, in a quiet voice, she spoke. "I was born in a place with no sky," she said, "deep underground, in a lab, a place where they built weapons, not people." Rylan's eyes narrowed. He had heard rumors. Stories told by broken soldiers about a secret project, hidden by the higher command. They called it Project Ether. "They made me fight when I was small," she continued. "They said emotions are weakness. They said names are useless, so they never gave me one." She looked up at him, her glowing eyes filled with something old pain. "I failed a mission. Once, I refused to hurt a child, so they threw me away, sent me to die in the jungle." Rylan's chest tightened. He had trained recruits before, but none like her. She wasn't just tough, she was designed to be tough, trained like a weapon, discarded like trash. He leaned forward. "Why didn't you tell me all this before?" "Because you would have looked at me the same way they did," she said, her voice trembling. "Like a tool, not a person." He didn't speak. She was right, at first. He had seen her as a joke, a burden, something weak, but not anymore. "You're not a tool, Liri," he said finally. "You're more human than half the soldiers here." She blinked, and for a moment, her lip trembled. She quickly turned her head, hiding the tears that tried to escape. "I didn't want to feel anything," she whispered. "But now, when I fight beside you, when I hear your voice, I feel things, and it scares me." Rylan reached out slowly, placing his hand over hers. "You don't have to be afraid. Not with me." Silence filled the tent, warm and real. Then, a sharp knock on the tent flap broke the moment. A soldier peeked in, saluted, and said, "Sir, command wants you in the debriefing room." Now, Rylan stood and looked at Liri. "Get some rest. I'll be back soon." She nodded, though her eyes followed him with quiet worry. In the debriefing room, high officers sat around a glowing table. Screens showed maps, ruins, and strange symbols from the last mission. One general pointed at Liri's face on the screen. "She opened a sealed Ethran ruin," he said. "That structure rejected all human scans, yet she accessed it like it was part of her blood." "She's part of the old program," another officer added. "She shouldn't even be alive." Rylan's hands clenched into fists. "She's alive because she chose to survive," he said, "and she saved more lives than any of your new tech ever did." A cold voice from the shadows spoke. "She's unstable. She's too dangerous to be left in the field. Transfer her to security observation." Rylan's heart dropped. He slammed his hand on the table. "No, you don't get to use her and throw her away again. She's under my command, and I won't give her up." The room went silent. One of the generals leaned forward slowly. "Then the next mission is yours, Captain," he said. "Take her into the heart sector. If she survives that, we'll reconsider." Rylan nodded, but inside, he was boiling. They were sending her to die again. This wasn't a mission, it was a test wrapped in poison. Later that night, Rylan returned to the tent. Liri was sitting just as he left her, but her eyes told him she knew. "They want to send me away, don't they?" she asked quietly. "No," he said, kneeling beside her. "They want us to go on one more mission. Together." She tilted her head. "Together?" He nodded. I'll fight beside you this time, not as your trainer, not as your commander, but as someone who believes in you. For the first time, she smiled without sadness, and whispered, Then I'll fight not because I was made to. I'll fight because you're with me. Asterisk. The sun rose over the alien jungle, casting red light through the mist. It was quiet. Too quiet. Captain Rylan checked his gear for the third time, his eyes scanning the treetops. Beside him stood Liri, calm but focused. She held her small blade across her back and a pulse pistol at her side. She looked ready, but Rylan could see the tension in her hands. They were heading into the heart sector, a forbidden zone, where entire squads had vanished without a trace. Strange ruins, wild beasts. An unknown tech filled the place, the kind of place the military used to test what they feared, and now, they were sending her in again. This time Rylan had chosen to go with her. Stay close, he said, adjusting his headset. I'll follow your steps. She replied without hesitation. Their team was small, only 5 soldiers, including them, each one armed to the teeth, each one unsure if they would return. As they marched through the thick vines and roots, strange sounds echoed around them, whispers in the wind, almost like voices. Liri's ears twitched again and again, her eyes darting from tree to tree. An hour in, the jungle changed. Trees twisted in unnatural ways. Glowing fungi lit the ground, and vines pulsed like they were alive. They reached an open clearing, and the team spread out to search for the entrance to the ruins. That's when the ground shook, without warning. Creatures burst from underground, 6-legged beasts, with armored hides and glowing red eyes. Ambush. The squad opened fire, but the bullets bounced off the beasts' shells. One soldier screamed as he was pulled into the earth. Another was knocked unconscious with one heavy strike. Rylan fired again and again, trying to draw their attention. Fall back, he yelled, but one of the creatures charged toward him with terrifying speed. And just as it lunged, Liri moved. She leaped through the air like lightning, slicing deep into the creature's eye with her blade. It screeched and collapsed, writhing. On the jungle floor, another beast turned toward her, and she didn't hesitate. Spinning, dodging, slashing, every move was precise, fast, graceful. Rylan watched in awe. He had trained her, yes, but this was beyond training. This was instinct, fury, and heart, all in one, together. They fought back to back, covering each other. When one beast charged, Liri distracted it, while Rylan blasted it down. When he tripped, she pulled him to his feet without a word. The jungle was fire and chaos, but between them, there was only trust. Finally, the creatures fell one by one, until silence returned. The ground was covered in steam and blood. The remaining 2 soldiers limped toward them, eyes wide with shock. Did she do all that? One whispered, looking at Liri. Rylan nodded. She's the reason we're alive. They found shelter in a hollow tree as night fell. Inside, Liri sat beside Rylan, her small frame stained with dirt and sweat. She was silent, as always, but her breathing was slow and steady. Rylan handed her a piece of ration bread, which she took gently. They ate in quiet. The fire between them soft and warm. You saved me again, Rylan said. You always do. Liri looked up, her glowing eyes meeting his. You didn't leave me behind. You came when no one else would. That's why I fight. He reached for her hand, and this time, she didn't pull away. Her fingers were small, calloused from training, but warm. For a moment, nothing else existed. No jungle, no mission, no war, only the 2 of them. Side by side, alive, together. You're not just a soldier, he whispered. You're my partner now. She smiled, not shy, not nervous, just real. I like that word, she said, partner, as the fire burned low. Rylan leaned back against the wood, and Liri rested her head on his shoulder. Neither spoke again, but both knew this bond wasn't made in peace. It was forged in fire. The next morning, they reached the ruins. hidden behind thick vines and heavy stone. The entrance shimmered with strange energy. Liri stepped forward and placed her hand on a panel. It lit up immediately, reacting to her touch. The door slid open with a loud hiss, revealing a long corridor, filled with glowing lines and moving shadows. Rylan looked at her. "Ready?" he asked. Liri nodded, her voice firm. "With you, always." And they stepped inside, not just as soldier and alien, not as teacher and student, but as something stronger, something deeper. They were no longer fighting for orders, they were fighting for each other. Asterisk. The bass was louder now. After Rylan and Liri returned from the heart sector, whispers followed them everywhere. Some soldiers stared in silence, some saluted, but others, they murmured behind closed doors. "She's just an alien," they said. "What makes her so special? Why does the captain treat her like family?" Liri walked through the training yard with her usual quiet steps. Her small figure moved between towering soldiers, unnoticed by most, but their voices carried. She heard them, every word. At the mess hall, she sat alone at the corner table. Rylan spotted her from across the room and walked over, placing his tray beside hers. She looked up, confused. "You're not supposed to sit here," she whispered. "I sit where I want," Rylan replied with a soft smile. "And right now, I want to sit with you." Others noticed. Lieutenant Voss, a tall and proud officer, stood up from a nearby table. He walked over, boots thudding hard on the floor. "Captain," he said sharply, "this is highly unprofessional." Rylan looked up slowly. "Eating?" "No," Voss snapped, favoring a lab-made creature over real soldiers. The room went silent, all eyes watching. Liri lowered her gaze, hands tightening around her tray. Rylan stood, his voice calm but cold. "She's done more for this base than most of you ever will. She's dangerous," Voss said, "unnatural. You're letting feelings cloud your judgment." "Something inside," Liri snapped. She stood, eyes glowing brighter than ever. "I have feelings," she said sharply. "I feel pain, I feel loyalty, and I feel honor, more than your poisoned words." Gasps echoed. Voss looked stunned, but his face twisted with anger. "You see," he said, "she's losing control, emotional instability, just what I warned Command about." Rylan stepped between them, his voice louder now. "Enough. Anyone here who has doubts about hurt, talk to me directly. Not behind backs, not through reports. I stand with her." Liri blinked, staring up at him. He wasn't just defending her, he was choosing her, in front of everyone. Later that evening, in her quarters, she sat on her small bed, knees pulled close. Rylan entered without knocking. She didn't speak, but her eyes were glassy. "You should be proud," he said, sitting beside her. "You stood your ground. You didn't need me." She shook her head slowly. "I don't want them to hate you because of me." "They can hate all they want," he said, "but they can't change what we've been through. They weren't there in the jungle. They didn't bleed beside me." She hesitated, then spoke softly. "Do you feel something when you look at me?" Rylan turned to her, surprised by the question. "Yes," he said after a moment. "I do. It scares me sometimes, but it's real." Liri reached out carefully, touching his hand. "I don't know what love feels like, but when I'm near you, I don't feel like a weapon anymore." "You never were," he whispered. "They just didn't see you the way I do." The next day, a combat simulation test was announced. A team versus team drill 2. Test strategy and leadership. Rylan was placed on one team without Liri. Voss, the lieutenant, requested her for his squad. She stood in the lineup, quiet but uneasy. Voss leaned close and said, "Let's see how loyal you really are." The match began, a full jungle zone set up with traps, drones, and paint blasters. Teams moved like real missions, firing harmless but fast paint rounds. Rylan's team advanced with caution, using tactics, while Voss's team pushed with brute force. Liri stayed silent, following orders, but her mind was elsewhere. At one point, Rylan's squad was cornered, low on cover, surrounded. Liri saw it all through her visor. Voss ordered her to take the shot. Now, end their run, he said. She raised her weapon, but her hands shook. In her scope, she saw Rylan come steady, trusting. She turned her weapon away and shot at a tree instead, giving his team time to escape. Voss screamed in rage. You disobeyed. He shouted. You betrayed your own team. After the simulation ended, she was brought before the commander. You sabotaged your own unit, the officer said. Why? Liri didn't flinch. Because I don't follow hate. I follow loyalty. They called Rylan in. He didn't let them speak first. If protecting someone who saved this base, this mission, and my life is wrong, then punish me too. The room went quiet again. The commander looked between the two of them, then sighed. No punishment, but from now on, you two are a unit. No more switching. That night, they sat under the stars. Far from the base, Liri looked up at the sky, her head resting gently on Rylan's shoulder. They'll never accept us, she whispered. Maybe not, Rylan replied, but I do, and I always will. She closed her eyes and said softly, then I'll fight for your heart, even if the whole world stands in the way. And Rylan smiled, because deep down, he knew she was already winning. The sky above the jungle turned dark with smoke. Alarms screamed across the base, red lights flashing everywhere. Rylan rushed through the halls, grabbing his gear, his mind spinning. An enemy fleet had landed near the southern ridge on ambush, unexpected and brutal. They weren't just pirates or raiders. These were professionals, trained, equipped, and deadly. Liri appeared beside him, already in full combat armor, her ears twitching at every sound. She said nothing, but her eyes met his, and in that single glance, they understood this mission could be the last. They boarded a dropship with a strike unit, flying low above burning trees and broken towers. The jungle below was chaos, fire spreading fast, smoke rising like a curtain of death. The pilot shouted over the comms, Captain Rylan, your squad will be dropped behind enemy lines. Extract the prisoners and destroy their signal array. Rylan nodded, turning to Liri. You with me? He asked. She didn't blink. Always, as they dropped into the jungle. Gunfire cracked from all directions. Explosions shook the ground as the team pushed through the trees. Rylan led from the front, Liri at his side like a shadow. They moved, with precision, like two parts of the same blade, reaching the enemy camp. They spotted the prison pods for captured soldiers held in energy cages. But between them and the prisoners stood a full squad of enemy drones and armored troopers. No time for stealth now, Liri, Rylan said. Take left flank, I'll go right. She nodded and vanished into the trees. Moments later, a scream cut through the air, followed by blasts of blue light. The enemy turned, confused, and Rylan struck from behind. Together, they moved like fire, unpredictable, unstoppable. In minutes, the enemy squad was down, and the prisoners were free. But the mission wasn't over yet. A larger force was coming, and the signal tower still stood, glowing red in the center of the enemy base. They had one chance to destroy it, and it meant going deeper into enemy ground. As they approached, a missile struck near them, the blast throwing Rylan across the field. His comm went silent, his vision blurred. He tried to stand, but pain shot through his ribs. He was trapped under debris, his arm pinned, smoke choking the air. Rylan, Liri's voice called out. She ran toward him, eyes wide, her heart pounding. She pulled at the metal with all her strength, gritting her teeth. He coughed, his voice weak. Liri, leave me. Finish the mission. No, she said, eyes glowing. I won't leave you. Not again, with a final cry. She lifted the beam just enough to drag him out. He collapsed in her arms, blood running from a cut on his forehead. She looked at him, then at the tower. It was their only chance to stop the enemy from calling more ships. I'll go, she whispered. You stay here. No, he said, gripping her hand. It's suicide. She leaned close, her forehead against his. Then let this be the fight that proves my heart. And she ran, faster than light, weaving through blasts and fire. She climbed the tower, dodging shots, her blade slicing wires and metal. Enemy soldiers tried to stop her, but she moved with fury and grace. Every memory, every scar, every word Rylan ever said pushed her forward. At the top of the tower, she ripped open the control panel and jammed her blade into the core. It exploded in a burst of blue flame, sending a shockwave across the base. The signal was dead, and the skies went quiet. Rylan, still lying near the trees, saw the explosion. He thought she was gone. His heart sank, a pain deeper than the wounds on his body. But then, through the smoke, a small figure walked toward him, limping, covered in burns. Liri, she dropped beside him, coughing. "You're alive?" he gasped. She nodded weakly. "And so are you." He held her close, not caring who watched, not caring what came next. "You didn't just save the mission," he whispered. "You saved my heart." She smiled, her voice soft and broken. "Then maybe it was always yours." The medics arrived minutes later, carrying them both to safety. The jungle burned behind them, but it didn't matter, because in that moment, under the smoke and stars, something stronger had survived, a bond that not even war could destroy. Weeks passed after the battle. The jungle was quiet now, smoke long gone, only green growing where fire had once raged. The war was over, or at least, the worst part of it. But inside Rylan's heart, a new kind of storm had started. He sat by the edge of the medical bay, looking out the window at the landing field. Ships came and went, carrying soldiers home, some wounded, some lucky, some broken, and today one of those ships was for her. Liri stood in the next room, her uniform clean, her wounds mostly healed. Her small frame was wrapped in a simple jacket, and a silver pendant hung around her neck, a gift from Rylan, the only thing he could give that meant more than words. It was shaped like a flame, just like her name Liri, the little fire that refused to die. Command had cleared her, not just as a soldier, but as a person. Her past with Project Ethra had been declassified, her actions recognized. They even offered her something rare, a chance to leave the military forever, to live free, to return to the surviving colonies of her kind, far beyond the core systems. She had earned peace, but peace came with a price. Rylan heard footsteps behind him. He turned, and there she was. Liri looked different, now not just in her uniform, or her posture, but in her eyes. She looked like someone standing at the edge of two worlds. "Ship leaves in 1 hour," she said quietly. He nodded, his throat tight. "They'll take care of you there," he said. "You'll be safe." She didn't respond at first. Then she walked closer, standing just a foot away from him. "I don't want safe," she said. "I want something real." Rylan looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "You deserve a life without war, without whispers behind your back, without fighting every day. But maybe," she said softly, "I was never meant to run from the fight. Maybe I was meant to choose it, this time, for me." He finally looked up, their eyes locked. No noise in the world could break that moment. Not the alarms, not the engines, not the war stories being told around them. "I don't want to be your student anymore," she whispered, "or your mission, or your partner in battle." His heart pounded. "What do you want to be?" he asked, his voice low. She reached out, placed her small hand over his chest, feeling the beat. "I want to be the one who stays," she said, "not because I was ordered to, but because my heart belongs here." Rylan took her hand, slowly, carefully, as if afraid she'd vanish again. "You were never just my recruit," he said. "You were the one thing I didn't expect to protect me. And now, you're the one I don't want to live without." Her smile was soft, shy, but full of light. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. No kiss, no words. Just two souls, breathing together in silence. That was enough. Minutes later, the ship stood ready, ramp open, engines hot. Liri walked toward it, her steps slow, thoughtful. The boarding officer waved her forward. "This your ride, ma'am?" he asked. She looked at the ramp, then back at the base, back at the man standing by the gate, and she shook her head. "No," she said. "My place is already chosen." The officer raised a brow, but didn't question her. She turned and walked away from the ship, leaving behind the past, the pain, and the ghosts of what she was made to be. Back at the gate, Rylan waited. And when she reached him, she didn't stop. She walked straight into his arms. He held her tight, and for the first time she felt truly whole. In the weeks that followed, the base changed. No one whispered anymore. They saw what Rylan and Liri had become, proof that loyalty wasn't weakness, that hearts could guide stronger than orders. They trained together, lived together, fought when needed, but more than anything they healed together. Sometimes they sat under the stars, her head resting on his shoulder. She would ask him about Earth, about oceans, about music, and he would ask her about her memories, about what she saw in the dark. And every time, she said the same thing. "I saw hope. It looked like you." Their story wasn't about war anymore. It wasn't about a tiny alien girl trained to be a weapon. It was about choice, and she had made hers not for duty, not for survival, but for love, and for Rylan. That choice meant more than any victory, because in a galaxy full of battles and borders, he had won something worth more than peace. He had won her heart, and she, quietly and fiercely, had won his, forever.